Good evening, St Andrew's Church, and whoever else out there in the webosphere that might be joining us today on YouTube. It is great to have you with us. Today's message is titled The Good News About the End of the World. The good news about the end of the world. But before we get into that, I just wanted to share a little bit about me and my family. Myself and my wife Jack and our two boys, we love to watch Survivor Australia together. And usually we'll always be watching it on catch up on the weekend. But last night, since the boys are in isolation and all the kids across Australia have got this extra week of pupil-free days tacked on to their Easter school holidays, we let them stay up, and we went together and we cooked up some caramel popcorn and we went and bedded down on the couch ready for the finale. And if you know anything about Survivor, the season finale always has the gnarliest, most difficult challenges, and last night's was no exception. The three remaining contestants were given this challenge where it's sort of even uncomfortable to look at. It's quite difficult to kind of describe, but they had this kind of ladder where they had to stand on these old kind of milk bottle type things out in the beautiful Fijian blue reef water, and on one side of them they had this rubber band attached to a gymnastic ring, and on the other side of them they had this giant ruby type idol kind of things, and the contestants had to try and find their footing on these sort of small lid type bottles that were wet and difficult and not big enough to really find any sort of comfortable footing. They had to hold on to this rubber band that was trying to pull them one way, and they had to keep a hand on this giant ruby idol. Now, if any of the things went awry, if they let go of the rubber band that was trying to pull them away from the idol, if they lost their footing at all, if they took a foot off either of the sort of two bottle stands, or if they stopped touching the giant ruby idol at any point, they were knocked out. Now, this was the most important challenge of Survivor, because of the three remaining players, if you were to win this challenge, you would have immunity from the next tribal council, and you would be guaranteed a 50-50 shot at winning the grand prize. So you can imagine the three contestants, they get their positions as best as possible. They grab hold of their rubber bands, they try and find some comfortable footing, they put their hand on the idol, and they try and find a happy place. They try and find a place that's comfortable. They try and find a concentrated zone where they can just buckle in, because it is not going to be a short amount of time. The minutes pass, the half an hour passes, an hour passes, 90 minutes passed, and the whole time that they are there, they are being pulled by this rubber band, and they are being stretched to almost maximum length to hold on to this ruby idol, all the while having pain screaming up your feet and legs, stuck in the middle between wanting desperately to hold on to this idol, but also not wanting to be pulled backwards by this rubber band. The challenge really was the challenge that we all face as Christians, and that we all as God's people face. And we see this really clearly in the last couple of weeks of our Sabbath school lesson, where we've looked at Daniel 11 and Daniel 12. And in because Daniel 12 being the sort of continuation of Daniel 11, we found in chapter 11 the great battle between the king of the north and the king of the south. We know that there's a historical application to both the king of the north and the king of the south, but we also know that there's this spiritual application that says that the king of the north and the king of the south is this great controversy. This controversy between good and evil, the controversy between Jesus himself and Satan. And what's interesting is if we looked at the historical application of Daniel chapter 11, we would see the king of the north. He sits above God's people. He sits above Israel on the map. And if we would look at where the king of the south makes his kingdom, he makes his kingdom to the bottom of Israel, to the south of Israel in Egypt. And in between sits God's people, being pulled one way or the other, stretched in the middle of this conflict zone where the king of the north and the king of the south would fight it out and duke it out for control. God's people were stuck in the middle. In Daniel 12, we saw in the first few verses last week that Michael stands up. And we know that Michael is the pre-incarnate Jesus before he became a man. And we know this for a couple of different reasons shortly, in a short way of speaking, but because Michael means he who is most like God. He is the chief of the angels. He's not an angel. He is the head of those angels. It is a job description, not a statement of being. And we see this title, Lord of Hosts, applied to Jesus several times in Scripture. We see it applied in Isaiah chapter 6. We see it applied when Joshua confronts the man with the drawn sword. We see it in Revelation when Jesus is riding the white horse, leading heaven's armies. Michael, it says in Daniel 12, Daniel 12 verse 1, stands up. And when he stands up, a time of great trouble happens that is unlike anything that has ever been seen before. It says, since there has been nations, we have not seen trouble like this. Something that should lead us to all have some anxiety, but there's a cure for this anxiety, and the cure for the anxiety comes from the angel Gabriel, and the angel Gabriel gives these 5 words to give assurance to Daniel. Because you see, Daniel isn't just worried about what is going to happen in the future. He's worried about what is going to happen to his people. He's been living in exile in Babylon and in the Medo-Persian Empire for the vast majority of his life, and he is looking forward to God's promise of reconciling his people back to Jerusalem and his people being God's people once more. And he's not sure if it's ever going to happen. And Gabriel comes to him and he gives him this good news for the end of the world. He gives it in just 5 short words. He says, your people shall be delivered. Your people shall be delivered. Gabriel gives Daniel this promise, a promise from God himself. And he comes along and he says, Daniel, I know you're anxious. I know you're worried about all the scary things that are going to happen. I know that you're concerned about your people being caught in this tension, in this battle between good and evil. But let me tell you, Daniel, at the end, your people shall be delivered. The good news at the end of the world is that God saves his people. The good news for you and I is that no matter what struggle, no matter what trouble, no matter what tension we are feeling in our lives, there is a time coming when God will deliver you and me. That's good news. The end of the world is coming. And as Christians, we are feeling this tension. As Christians, we find ourselves in this final immunity challenge, survivor-esque game. But for us, we just call it life. On one side, we have Jesus that we are reaching up, trying to cling on to him. He is our ruby idol that we are sort of looking towards, wanting to hang on to. We sort of find ourselves tentatively with tentative footing in life. Some of us will go through difficult times, we'll lose loved ones, we'll find financial hardships, we'll have relationships problems, we'll find struggles in life, and the footing will be uncomfortable and we will struggle, and that'll make it difficult for us to keep our eyes upwards and hanging on to the idol called Jesus. And then on the other side of all that, even with the wrongful footing, even with our hand gripped firmly on the idol, we still have this pull from down beneath us. This tension from this side, from the evil one. This tension that just wants to pull us away from our destiny in Jesus. But the good news of the end of the world is you shall be delivered. Because when Gabriel tells Daniel, your people shall be delivered, he means God's people. And we know that he means God's people because he says, whoever is found or written in the book, whoever has accepted Jesus' sacrifice for them, whoever finds their name in the book of life, whoever has taken hold of Jesus will be delivered. So what's the good news for the end of the world? The good news for the end of the world is this. You might be feeling like you are being pulled further and further away from the idol, but Jesus has got a plan for you. He has got a plan to deliver you, to rescue you, to save you. Your feet might be hurting really badly where you are at the moment. You might be going through a really difficult time where you've lost your job through this COVID crisis. You might be going through a really difficult time where you might be sick. You might have a loved one sick. You might be having family stress because you've got the kids at home. You might be struggling with knowing what to do in life. Your footing might be unstable and uncertain, but Jesus will deliver you. The good news for the end of the world is if your name is written in that book of life, if you've accepted Jesus' sacrifice for you, his people shall be delivered. It's a promise. It's concrete. It's locked in. The good news about the end of the world is that we would see the full reality of that deliverance in Jesus, in our reconciliation with him, in no longer being torn between two worlds, no longer having to struggle finding our footing in this world, but in finding our footing in the recreated world with Jesus as our God and our light, and sin and death is no more. So my hope and prayer for us today is that no matter where you are, whether you are feeling the pull of that tension being pulled away, whether you're finding it difficult to keep your footing in this life, and whether you have got gripped hold tightly onto that idol, whether you're gripped hold tightly onto Jesus, My hope is that you would find some peace and some security in that message from Gabriel to Daniel, that your people shall be delivered, that you, God's people, that you who have accepted Jesus Christ in their life will be delivered when he comes again. It's good news for us. It's good news for the end of the world.